Krystal, what are you taking a look at?
Well, guys, after 19 children were slaughtered in their classrooms along with their brave teachers, Republican elites were faced with a bit of a difficult political predicament. All of their normal tools of distraction and deflection in response to these repeated tragedies were kind of taken off the table. The American public is no longer really impressed with the argument that you just shouldn't talk about policy changes in the wake of mass shootings. Those mass shootings are so routine that to avoid such a conversation would preclude ever discussing how we might make the country safer. And the normal argument from the right that we just need more good guys with guns also proved unworkable once we learned that 19 supposed good guys with guns stood outside of that classroom for an hour and did nothing. Not even attempting to breach the doors to come to the aid of those hiding in terror under tables or smeared with the blood of their friends playing dead or bleeding out for lack of medical care on the floor. So instead, they have overwhelmingly landed on this.
And one of the things that everyone agreed is don't have all of these unlocked back doors. Have one door into and out of the school and have that one door armed police officers at that door. If that had happened, if those federal grants had gone to this school, when that psychopath arrived, the armed police officers could have taken him out and we'd have 19 children and 2 teachers still alive.
There is no complete solution. There's only a series of partial solutions. We can't just throw labor at this. I hear impassioned pleas, Sean, for an officer in every school in America. That's logistically unfeasible and mathematically impossible. What we need to do is utilize smart technology. That's what's needed. We need to install man traps. This is something we've discussed in the past. Back in 2018, I checked. Man traps, a series of interlocking doors at the school entrance that are triggered by a tripwire. The tripwire can be a gunshot, broken glass, a manual switch tossed by a school employee, and it traps the shooter like a rat. And when he's trapped like a rat, we're buying time. The most precious commodity these children can ever get is time to run, time to hide, time to get away from this madman and his bullets. It's tripwires, it's man traps. It's not labor, it's not gun control.
What we need now is a top-to-bottom security overhaul at schools all across our country. Every building should have a single point of entry. There should be strong exterior fencing, metal detectors, and the use of new technology to make sure that no unauthorized individual can ever enter the school with a weapon.
We need booby traps or single entrances, ballistic blankets, TSA-style security checkpoints. By the way, having multiple entrances is a pretty important thing for making sure kids can escape in a fire. But the general idea is turn our schools into impenetrable military fortresses which can never be breached. And listen, I am not against considering how to make our schools safer. In fact, in the wake of this tragedy, I was relieved, personally, thinking about the design of my son's public elementary school, where nearly all the classrooms have doors to the outside, providing a potential route of escape if the unthinkable happens and a killer wanders their halls looking for an unlocked classroom door. But there's a couple of problems with this whole discussion. First of all, when you focus only on fortifying schools to the exclusion of any attempts to make society safer so that we can send our kids to school without fear, you accept that our schools are a battlefield. You resign yourself to a world in which kindergartners, along with learning their letters, have to learn what to do and where to hide if a lunatic with weapons of war comes to murder them and their friends. You admit that the adults have thoroughly failed them, have failed to create a safe society for them, so the best we can do is hope to thwart the killers once they've already arrived, drilling children on how to survive the war. But of course, the truth is, the adults have failed them. No one can doubt that at this point, which is why I'm not opposed to thinking through the safest school architecture, protocols, and technology. But the other problem with this mode of thinking, with taking as a given that our places of learning should also be fortified as places of combat, is that we've kind of already done it. We've already hardened the schools. Congress has acted in a bipartisan manner repeatedly to appropriate hundreds of millions of dollars over 2 decades to the twin goals of, number 1, training the police to respond to active shooters in schools, and number 2, fortifying schools so that they will not be easy targets. Uvalde's police and their school district, they were thoroughly up to date and fully funded on both police training and school hardening. Fences, locked doors, school resource officers, state-of-the-art training. In the end, none of it mattered. Now, I graduated high school back in 1999, the last days of the old innocence. That was the year that 2 teenagers at Columbine High School murdered 12 of their classmates and one of their teachers before turning the guns on themselves. Now, at Columbine, police responded to 911 calls almost immediately, but then it took them another 20 excruciating minutes after they were on the scene to actually enter the school and attempt to rescue terrorized students. That response now seems kind of fantastic compared to what the cops in Uvalde did, honestly. But in response to the horror of Columbine, Congress opened up the purse strings and they funded millions in research and dissemination of new SWAT team trainings so that every police department in the country would know exactly what to do if faced with this nightmare scenario. The Uvalde Police Department was thoroughly schooled in this federally funded post-Columbine active shooter response. In fact, that school district had recently hosted 2 training days for law enforcement, including one that was just 2 months ago. And the protocol the responding cops were meant to follow could not have been more clear. The number one priority, in the words of their training manual, is to, quote, stop the killing. Officers' first priority is to move in and confront the attacker. It goes on to make clear that if you are the first person on the scene, you are not going to wait for backup. Quote, in many cases, that immediate response means a single, solo officer response until such time as other forces can arrive. The best hope that innocent victims have is that officers immediately move into action to isolate, distract, or neutralize the threat, even if that means one officer acting alone. Now, in case that wasn't clear enough, the training spells it out that if you've got a problem with being the sole officer responding to that threat, you need to find another line of work. Quote, a first responder unwilling to place the lives of the innocent above their own safety should consider another career field. Now, we all know what happened, though, when it was time to put all that training to the test. Cops cowered in the hallways for an hour without even attempting to breach the door. More stood outside, handcuffing and tasing desperate parents who were begging them to act. It took the Border Patrol finally overriding the local PD before the carnage actually stopped. No matter how much training the good guys with guns had, in the end, it was no match for human cowardice in the face of a madman with an AR-15. But that's not all, because Uvalde, like nearly every American school, has also been physically fortified against exactly such a threat. Now, school hardening is a big business. So while Congress couldn't pass even the most basic, popular gun reforms, they had no problem dishing out millions at the behest of industry lobbyists to this burgeoning profit center. Bill Clinton passed tens of millions in dollars for school security. George W. Bush sent $350 million to schools to hire on-site police and install security cameras and other fortifications. Every Congress continues these appropriations, fueling what has now become a multi-billion-dollar industry with its own trade convention and influence peddlers. Texas has actually gone even further. Following a school shooting in Santa Fe that killed 10, Governor Greg Abbott passed $100 million in school security funds, a portion of which flowed to Uvalde Consolidated School District to harden their schools. They invested in perimeter fencing, in two-way radios, threat assessment teams at each school, protocols like locking every classroom door. They hired more police. They invested in Social Sentinel, that's software which tracks students' social media to evaluate any potential threats. An app called Stop It for students to anonymously report bullying. Raptor Visitor Management to scan and check visitor IDs against sex offender registries and to guard against potential kidnapping threats. None of this state-of-the-art tech stopped the murder of 19 babies. Now listen, just because those measures failed in Uvalde doesn't mean that they never work and should just be tossed down altogether. However, there is no actual proof that what the school safety industry is selling actually works. A comprehensive review by the National Association of School Psychologists was unable to identify any research that showed that these expensive security add-ons actually thwarted attacks or lessened the death count. We have been hardening schools for 2 decades now. The carnage has never stopped. In fact, last year saw a record-breaking number of school shootings, 230 plus. That is double of the year prior. The bottom line is this: if we actually want to protect our kids, no amount of school hardening and good guys with guns and state-of-the-art training can substitute for preventing these horrors from occurring in the first place. If we are actually serious about protecting the lives and innocence of our children, we will work to keep AR-15s out of the hands of lunatics. We will pass universal health care so everyone struggling with mental health issues can actually get health. And even more challenging, we will work to create a society that produces fewer deranged or hate-fueled killers to begin with. And again, Sagar, I don't want to say none of this stuff works. However, I do think cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.